Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio. Join George Smart and Frank King as they talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Show your support by reviewing us at iTunes and visiting US Modernist massive archives at usmodernist.org. And now, the man who once assaulted a sock puppet, Frank King.
You guys.
Frank?
Okay, look, in my defense, it was late. We had been drinking a lot. And the sock puppet had it coming because he made a lewd suggestion. So here's the good news. I took him out with one punch. However, the bad news is his sock puppet friend came along and knocked me out.
Oh, that's
I know.
embarrassing.
Support for US Modernist Radio comes from Mod Homes Realty. If you're having a hard time finding or selling a modernist home, Sarah Salk of Mod Homes Realty is a wonderful, intelligent, lovely single lady who loves Drake, strolling through the fresh, ripening produce at Whole Foods, and any of the Magic Mike movies. No, wait a minute. That's her Our Time profile. Sarah Salk is a real estate agent who gets modern like you do. She's totally into it and has the expertise, experience, and track record to close your deal. You can find her at www.modhomesrealty.com or 919-601-7339. And by Quality Fabricators of Benson. You don't need no pricey architects when Quality Fabricators of Benson can build you one of them modernistic houses for half the cost of real professionals with actual education and experience. I mean, how hard can it be? The QFab boys, they take cash, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, Bitcoin, and even Starbucks cards.
Hey, thank you, Frank. I'm George Smart. The QFab guys have been really great sponsors. I mean, they're no Sarah Salk, but when you get down to it, really, who is?
True.
Hey, each year, US Modernist goes to Europe to tour modernist buildings, and I was in London in May attempting to interview Prince Charles, a man well known for hating modernist buildings for decades. That didn't work out, but I did get to visit with someone a bit less well known, but way more appreciative, the award-winning architect Alison Brooks. Brooks hails from Canada. Oh, Canada. And moved to London in 1988 after graduating from the University of Waterloo. She established Alison Brooks Architects in 1996 and has earned worldwide acclaim for thoughtful yet bold design and ingenious detailing. Named by Debrett's as one of Britain's 500 most influential people, which is a huge deal in Britain, she is the only UK architect to have won all three of their most prestigious architecture awards. The voice you hear with us and US Modernist London tour manager, Angela Roll. And I wish I knew the name of the oblivious woman who insisted on cutting through our room multiple times, clopping in her heels. But
Yes, I do too.
we kept calm and carried on. Let's go to London.
Welcome to US Modernist Radio. I am George Smart in London today, visiting with Alison Brooks. So my first question for you, Alison, given your history and how you came to the UK, do you have young Canadian women coming and knocking on your door now that you're very successful, asking to join?
Yes, I do. I have a continuous stream of architecture students, mainly from University of Waterloo, which is my alumnus, my university in Canada, back in Ontario. And so I have an ending stream of very talented female students and sometimes graduates who would like to come and work for me in the UK. There are visa issues sometimes. If you can get a 2-year working holiday visa or a student visa, but even as a Canadian, you can't just come and work and move to England permanently. You have to have a visa or a grandparent. So, yes, but I think in a way my practice has become a destination, a sort of European destination for young, ambitious architects who want an experience that's outside of the North American norm, so to speak.
And I guess that was your rationale too. You wanted to get outside of the US and Canada and do something different?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I really felt at the end of my architectural career, where I'd worked at a lot of different practices in Toronto and around Ontario, that I wanted to go to a city or a place in the world where nobody knew me, and I would just have to find my way and have an adventure. And I've always been attracted to very big cities. I love the density, I love the complexity and the diversity of a city like London. And so I used my Commonwealth visa to come to the UK and to start to work.
Did you have the same visa restrictions back then, or could you just come and plop down and stay?
Well, very similar. No, I couldn't stay. I had to, I actually was able to use my partner's patriality visa to be able to stay. And we eventually got married, and so it's really through marriage to somebody who has a UK grandparent that I was able to stay. So I suppose, there's a chance that I might not have been here if that hadn't happened, because I came on my own. You need to find a way to work in a place either through a work permit or a patriality visa or something. But I always had the urge to go abroad and work somewhere completely foreign to where or as foreign as I could get to where I was familiar, such as Toronto or, Canadian practices.
Did you think of Australia at all?
No.
No?
I mean, I'd been...
Because if you want to go far...
that is farther. I'd been to England. I had a very meaningful and kind of influential trip to England with my mother in 1984, and that was after I'd spent 4 months in Rome. So I'd spent 4 months sort of absorbing antiquity, the incredible legacy of the Roman period, and in a way my trip to England after that was like seeing classical civilization built by sort of 17th century and 18th century architects who had all done the grand tour, come back to England, and Palladian architecture, Robert Adam, John Nash, all of the great country houses, all of the amazing capability brown landscapes. It was like an immersion in this reconstruction of Roman civilization, but in this incredibly lush context, which is the English countryside. And it was all, I don't know, you kind of fall in love with England and that kind of sensibility where landscape and architecture and history come together to create this incredibly fertile context for creativity that's very much about the future. It can be very radical, but there's this appreciation and this amazingly, historically fascinating place that you can draw on.
Well, Alison, your firm has done exceptionally well. I just saw a wall full of trophies and certificates. Over here, you seem to have gotten the Triple Crown of awards, the Lawrence Prize, the Mance Medal, and the Sterling Prize, which is like winning, the Kentucky Derby?
The Triple Crown. The
Triple Crown in the U.S. for horse racing. So people are really into what you're doing.
Yes, it's been a long journey, I suppose, but a successful one so far. Not that it was easy. These things are never easy. You really have to commit your life, just kind of your life work that goes into these kinds of achievements. But I suppose I've been able to use my foreignness, my ability to look at things with fresh eyes.
Your nice Canadianness.
I'm not always nice, but you do have the advantage of distance when you're not from the place. You see things that people who've lived there, their whole life don't see, and so one of the great things of being an architect is that you you always have a different client, a different brief, a different place, and you go and explore it and you discover it, and you kind of fall in love with things about that place and get very inspired by them. And very often the people who live there just don't see it because they're so used to it. And so then when you bring that kind of fresh sensibility to a place and try to really extract the most you can sort of creatively and artistically from that inspiration, then you can, in a way, design things that people relate to because they can connect to the ideas that you are describing when you describe your work. So I suppose in a way it's about, I suppose I work quite hard to create meaningful relationships with both the places and the people where I work. And that's kind of the source of the work.
I noticed it was a couple days ago you spoke at a conference about architecture and neuroscience. Is that right?
Yeah.
So let's talk brain surgery a moment, can we? What is the deal with bankers and their approaches to valuing design and architecture? I understand they're obsessed with bedrooms. Is that right?
Oh, right. Well, the housing industry or the development industry in the UK is based on certain ways of measuring value in architecture and in development. And in Britain, there's this very strange thing where properties are valued according to the number of bedrooms. So, a 2-bedroom house is worth X and a 3-bedroom house is worth Y. And they don't actually take into account the overall square meters of the house. And if you try to add other spaces, such as studies or family rooms, which are completely unheard of in the UK, or basements or attics or any other kinds of space, they don't count. They don't become part of the valuing formula. So it's very, very restrictive. I spend a lot of my life actually arguing for square meters and arguing for volume and trying to explain to property industry professionals that actually things like home offices and lofts and family rooms actually have value that they can sell. But they're very hard to convince. It's in North America, we have the luxury of space, and I think the development industry understands that if you provide more space, people always need more space, and we need to adapt the way we design to the way people live, and new technologies and things like home working and gaming and the web and social media means that people work everywhere all the time, and the home is, you could see as a place of work as much as a place for your family life. And so this opening up of your mind in terms of how you think of homes and how you think of the value of the different spaces in a home is something that, it's quite hard to shift in the development industry, but I'm working on it. I'm always working on it.
In the U.S., to talk about volume in any sort of discussion, the banker's eyes just glaze over. There's no idea of a cubic square foot. It's always a 2-dimensional square foot. In the UK, are they any more progressive about space and volume? And
not really, no. But it is something that I've been working for and arguing for, because I think that ceiling heights, for example, have a huge impact on the way people feel about space. That if you have a very small room with very low ceilings, it feels very claustrophobic, and especially if it also has a small window, it's even worse. If you have very small rooms with a high ceiling and with a very tall window, it doesn't feel small. You feel like the space is filled with light, and the boundaries of your space are actually what you see out the window, which is very expansive. And the taller the ceiling, the more natural daylight you get. The reason that the Victorians and the Georgians built buildings with very tall ceilings is because there was no electricity. And so they had to maximize the number of hours of daylight
yes,
that you could get in a day, and also commercial spaces. So it's very common sense, this idea that the higher the ceilings, the taller the window, the more natural light. But it also, in my view, really improves the proportions of the building from the exterior. So it's this kind of understanding that generosity and expansiveness in terms of internal volume actually can be read from the street. That if you have beautiful, generous, well-lit spaces on the inside, you can see that as a pedestrian walking down the street, that buildings actually communicate the quality of space that they have inside.
One of the buildings that you designed that communicated to me that I wanted to go there right away was in a place I didn't even know existed. Is it pronounced Helgoland?
Helgoland.
Helgoland?
Yes, Helgoland.
Which is an atoll off the coast of Germany?
Yes,
right?
in the North Sea.
It's so small, I have to use my thumbs to use my iPhone over and over to get to it. And it is just a obscenely delicious hotel that you did. I want to go check in, but I understand, is it closed now? Is it gone?
No, it's still there.
It's still there?
It's still there, but you have to catch a plane, a very small plane in Hamburg to fly there, or get on a ferry. And it's a 3-hour journey to go by sea. So it's quite hard to get to, but it's very popular for these kind of ferry holidays for German people. They go there because it's also a very healthy place. There's no pollution, there's no cars, so it's a sort of therapeutic, allergy-free, pollutant-free island. So it's very popular for sort of spa tourism.
And is it true that there's an airport on one island and everybody else is on the other island?
Yes, yep, that's true. So you have to take a little boat from the airport to the main island. But it's a really interesting place, and I suppose I was really interested in trying to create this sense of being underwater in the hotel, that it would have this, be kind of like a seascape where everything is slightly fluid, curvilinear, lots of organic shapes based on radii, and that it would give you that sense of calmness that you feel when you dive under the water. So that was the ambition, and it was a really exciting project as the first project I had as an architect starting out.
So here you are, a brand new architect. How do you get a project 3 hours from the middle of nowhere off the coast of Germany? How does that just happen?
Well, what's amazing is that this all happened before computers. And so I actually wrote a letter to that client. When I started up my office, I thought, who are the clients that I've met that I didn't actually work with in my previous life that I could approach and introduce myself as having started my practice. And I wrote 3 letters, and one of them was to that client who was a developer, industrialist in Hamburg. And I just wrote to him and said, I've started my practice. I'd be very interested in working with you, because I'd met him pitching for a job in Hamburg the year before. And amazingly, about 3 months later, I got a phone call from Hamburg, and he asked, would you like to design a hotel for me in Helgoland? And it was amazing.
You said, sure.
I said,
I don't
sure.
know where Helgoland is, but I'm there.
I'm there. And I remember the very first sort of correspondence we wrote. I was working on a Mac Classic, those little tiny Macs with a tiny little
Tiny
black
screen.
and white screen and printing out of the little bomb and the little printer. And I remember we upgraded that Classic from 2 megabytes of RAM to 4 megabytes.
Ooh,
and that was
that's smoking.
and that was the capacity of that computer. And we were actually drawing on it in CAD. We actually drew our very first drawings on a Mac Classic, which is very funny. I still have it. Actually, I have about 8 generations of Mac. I have every Mac I've ever owned from 1996 till today. So I'm a sort of devotee of
That should be a
Macs.
little exhibition in your office.
Yes, it's
The evolution of hardware.
Yeah. Most of my practice, well, all of it now is with PCs, but I've stuck to the laptop. That's a Mac. So
You have a couple of interesting projects going on now. I understand you're putting together 4 buildings in Greenwich.
Yes, yeah. It's urban block in Greenwich with 4 buildings on it. And it's a very high-density urban block with a 30-story tower, 17-story tower, and 11-story tower.
That's a big
5-story
project.
block.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's a big project. It's high density. It's for a Hong Kong developer who's really developing the whole Greenwich Peninsula as a it's kind of like New York or Hong Kong in terms of its density and the kind of character of the place. There will be a central park, so lots of sort of really great public space, and it's on the river. So the idea of our 4 buildings was to create this sort of cluster of buildings, each of which has views, sort of panoramic views across the river and across the peninsula, and they also taper. They're the first residential towers in London that are tapered, and that was about sort of letting more light into the center of the block, so the towers get smaller as they move up. And in a way, the architecture was inspired by the chimneys of Greenwich Power Station. There's this huge power station with brick chimneys that have cast iron strapping around the brick, and they're also tapered. And in a way, that was the only thing that Greenwich was known for before it was developed. It was just an industrial sort of wasteland with this big power station. But
Most of the little peninsulas along the Thames seem to be abandoned wastelands at some point or another.
It started as a working river and then was gradually sort of civilized over time. But there's still quite large expanses where things like concrete manufacturing wharfs and recycling wharfs are still in use. And it's quite interesting, actually, that London as a city still is quite supportive of having working wharfs sort of integrated and dispersed amongst the kind of, urban finished embankments and riverside developments that happen. So I think that's quite good that there's that kind of diversity. So in a way, our scheme in Greenwich was kind of drawing on that industrial legacy and trying to create buildings that are not necessarily immediately recognizable as being apartment buildings. They could be office buildings. They could be, any other kind of use. They're black, which is quite unusual as well for residential buildings in London. But I really feel black as a color, particularly when it's faceted, when you use it in planes, like you work with triangulated or angled or faceted planes. Black also becomes silver and gray and white, depending on how light reflects from it. So,
from our audience is a little confused. She's talking about planes as in geometry, not planes as in you fly
airplanes,
through the air.
yeah.
Yes.
So planar, in terms of sort of planar expression. So the buildings are kind of faceted. The cladding, the skin it's all triangulated and faceted, and it's a kind of lattice. So we're trying to do something new with the language, the form, the expression of residential towers that is away from sort of glassy, condominiums that all look the same, and it's something that really has a lot of character and is kind of crystalline and kind of mysterious, and hopefully will be robust enough to survive many, many generations of use. A little bit, I mean, probably my biggest influence with those buildings is the John Hancock building in Chicago.
In Chicago, yes.
Which is, I think, an incredibly beautiful, monumental, but also very urban masterpiece, also of structure. And it has, I think, residential and office and public space in it. And it's such a powerful symbol, in a way, on the Chicago skyline. And so, in a way, the references go deeper than just the chimneys of Greenwich. I also have a kind of North American history. Also, the black towers of Mies van der Rohe in New York, or in Montreal, or Toronto. They had a very, very big impression on me as a young person or a young architect studying in North America.
Now, in London, have you made it as an architect if your building gets a nickname like the walkie-talkie or the razor? I mean, is that how you know you've really succeeded when the public gives you something like that?
I don't know. I think there are a lot of nicknames that have been given to buildings that are not complimentary that I won't mention on the program, but it's quite dangerous to have a building that can be sort of stigmatized with a nickname. So I think, in a way, if you create something that's a landmark, there's a good chance it will get a nickname. I think the English love playing with words, and they love giving things nicknames.
Yes.
I don't know if anybody does that in New York or North Carolina.
Tower doesn't have a nickname. It's just always called the John Hancock Tower.
Yes.
Even though it has those two antennas, I guess, coming out of the top.
Yeah.
Do you think someone would call that like Alien
or Darth Vader or something? I don't know. I think it sort of transcends nicknames. I think in a way that's an achievement when your architecture can't be, sort of identified with just a single sort of cliche. It transcends it, and it's more noble somehow than that, which is maybe a greater achievement.
Well, in North Carolina, people just call anything they don't like, they call it the Taj Mahal because it's too big and too expensive.
Right.
That's just their go-to.
Yeah. In Canada, people call things French chateaus. It's the chateau syndrome. Maybe in North Carolina, it's the Taj Mahal syndrome. When you have the opportunity to do something really significant, it's knowing when to stop, knowing how to edit out inessential ideas and really focusing on the important things that you want to say or communicate with the architecture. So it's a kind of crucial thing, the editing process, and being critical and making sure that all of the elements of a project that you design kind of support the main idea, and that kind of main idea underpins everything.
Well, thank you very much for spending time talking with me, and thank you for participating in our Matsumoto Prize jury last year. It was great to have you.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure, and yes, look forward to seeing more amazing modern houses in the U.S., perhaps working in
Well, we'll have Alison's contact information in case you'd like to reach out across the Atlantic and get her to design you a fantastic house.
Okay, guys, wait a minute. You went to London without me? You told me you didn't have budget for me to go to Benson to see the QFab boys. If you'd like to travel to Europe on our annual architecture trip, which I just became aware of, send an email to george@ncmodernist.org. I don't think that'll work for me, but I'm going to give it a try. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Sarah Sonk, the real estate agent who loves modernist houses just as much as you do. 919-601-7339. And by the fine gentleman at Quality Fabricators of Benson, whom I hope to meet someday if George can scratch up the gas money.
Travel money, right.
Yeah. Okay, take us out, Tom.
Visit usmodernist.org for more information about today's guests. US Modernist Radio is produced at Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. US Modernist Radio is a production of North Carolina Modernist Houses, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. Show your support by writing a great review of us on iTunes. And George and Frank and I will be back in 2 weeks for another Riddler, Penguin, Joker, Catwoman edition of US Modernist Radio. We miss you, Adam West.
Oh, yeah.
You are by far the
yes.
best Batman.
The best.